What if 8 simple words could stop a billionaire and save an entire town? What if a few simple words from a poor waitress stopped a billionaire from making a terrible mistake? It sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? A powerful man on the verge of erasing an entire community brought to his knees not by a legal challenge or a financial setback, but by a single, quiet sentence from someone he'd barely noticed. This isn't just a story about a rich man and a humble woman. It's about the seismic shift that can occur when genuine human connection crashes into cold, calculated ambition. Her words were so disarmingly simple, so profoundly true, that they pierced through his boardroom armor like a wrecking ball through glass, shattering his carefully constructed worldview. Stay with us until the very end, because the incredible sentence that saved hundreds of homes, countless memories, and an entire way of life is only 8 words long. And trust me, you'll want to write it down. We've all heard tales of billionaires, those titans of industry who seem to operate on a different plane of existence, their decisions shaping skylines and economies with a mere stroke of a pen. But what happens when one of these titans, driven by an insatiable hunger for more encounters, a force more powerful than any corporate merger or hostile takeover, the simple, unyielding truth of human value? This is the story of Julian Sterling, a man who believed the world was his to acquire, and Lila Castillo, a woman who understood that some things are priceless. It's a story about a clash of worlds, a battle of values, and the unexpected moment when a tired waitress, fueled by nothing but integrity and kindness, managed to change the course of destiny for an entire neighborhood. Julian Sterling woke up in a penthouse where the windows were so wide the sunrise looked like it belonged to him personally. Not just a sunrise, mind you, but his sunrise, a private spectacle painted across the Manhattan skyline just for him. He owned rail lines that snaked across continents, cookie brands that filled grocery store aisles from coast to coast, and 3 professional sports teams he'd never once bothered to watch play. At 42, Julian had already run out of things to buy that gave him even a flicker of genuine joy. The thrill of acquisition had long since faded, replaced by a dull ache of emptiness that even a private jet couldn't outfly. So he turned his insatiable gaze to the last untouched corner of the city, a place others deemed irrelevant. The 6 blocks of cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, and overgrown gardens, affectionately known as Maplewood. It wasn't a landmark district. It had no grand statue, no world-famous pizza joint, no prestigious museum. Maplewood was just people. People who waved at each other from their porches, who shared garden tools over rickety fences, who knew each other's triumphs and tragedies. Julian, however, saw only square footage. He saw untapped potential, a blank canvas for his next masterpiece of steel and glass. His plan was brutally simple, elegantly efficient. Flatten everything, plant 20 gleaming glass towers, and christen the complex Sterling Sky. The demolition crews were already booked. City officials had predictably signed off on the necessary permits, and the last legal hurdle was his signature on the final eviction notices. He decided to celebrate this impending triumph by taking a walk through the very streets he was about to erase. Incognito, of course, cloaked in a $10 hoodie and scuffed sneakers, telling himself he wanted to feel the pulse of the place he was about to delete. What he really wanted deep down was to silence that tiny, persistent voice that whispered, "You're about to steal more than land. You're about to steal memories. You're about to erase lives." But Julian Sterling had always been a master at silencing inconvenient truths. He'd built an empire on it, He walked past Mama Rosie's diner, its neon sign flickering like a tired old heart. He saw children playing hopscotch on the cracked pavement, their laughter echoing off brick walls that would soon be rubble. He saw elderly couples tending to small flower beds, their hands gnarled with age, but still tender with care. And with every step, that tiny voice grew a little louder, a little more insistent. He pushed it down, reminding himself that progress demanded sacrifice, that sentimentality was a weakness he couldn't afford. This was business. This was his legacy, or so he told himself. At the corner of Maple and 8th, the neon sign of Mama Rosie's diner buzzed with the weary hum of 1,000 stories. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting sense of coffee bacon and yesterday's pie. This was Lila Castillo's world, a vibrant tapestry woven from steaming mugs and whispered confessions. She balanced 4 plates on one arm, a feat of culinary acrobatics, while simultaneously helping a first grader named Mikey with his spelling homework with the other hand. No honey giraffe has 2 F's like Fluffy. She'd instruct her voice a warm melody against the clatter of cutlery. Lila was 29, and life had already taught her more lessons than most people learned in a lifetime. She was raising her little brother Mateo on a shoestring budget made up of meager tips and the occasional day-old pie that Mama Rosie herself would insist she take home. Despite the endless grind, the aching feet, and the constant worry, Lila still managed to learn every customer's name, their regular orders, and often their troubles. People want to taste kindness before they taste coffee. She'd often say, a philosophy that imbued every interaction with genuine warmth. Her sneakers might have had holes worn through from countless miles on the diner's checkered floor, but her laughter, bright and infectious, was hole-free. That morning it echoed joyously as she refilled Mr. Alvarez's coffee cup. Mr. Alvarez, the retired mail carrier, a fixture of Maplewood, had walked these very streets for 30 years, delivering not just letters, but news, gossip, and a steady presence. He was practically family. Lila didn't know the quiet man in the cheap hoodie who slid into the corner booth, trying and failing to blend in. He looked out of place too, still, too watchful. But she saw him, just as she saw everyone. She brought him the Tuesday special, without asking. 2 eggs scrambled just right, crisp bacon buttered toast, and a side of listening, if he wanted it. She believed everyone, no matter how gruff or silent, carried a story, and sometimes all they needed was someone to listen. Julian, for his part, tried to appear nonchalant, observing the diner's easy rhythm. He noted the way Lila moved efficient and graceful despite her obvious fatigue. He saw the genuine smiles, the easy banter, the way Mr. Alvarez joked with Mikey about his spelling. This wasn't a business, it was a living room. And he was about to tear it down. The dissonance was unsettling. Julian expected the eggs to taste like cardboard, bland and forgettable like so much of the food he ate in his gilded cage. Instead, they tasted like Sunday mornings he'd never had, warm, comforting, and imbued with a simple, honest goodness that surprised him. He flagged Lila down, trying his best to sound casual, dismissive even. "So, what's the big deal about this place? Looks like it's falling apart," he said, gesturing vaguely around the bustling, slightly worn diner. Lila leaned against the booth, her posture tired but her gaze steady and gentle. She didn't rise to his bait, didn't get defensive. Instead, she offered a truth so simple it almost sounded profound. "Sir, the buildings have cracks, but the stories don't." Julian snorted. A rich man reflex, a dismissive habit he'd honed over years of dealing with people who dared to challenge his perspective. But something in her calm, unwavering eyes, a quiet dignity that refused to be ruffled, made him ask the next question. A question he genuinely wanted answered. If you got a fat check to move, would you take it? Lila glanced across the diner, her eyes softening as she watched Mr. Alvarez patiently teaching her little brother Mateo how to fold napkins into elegant swans. It was a small, everyday moment, but it spoke volumes. She turned back to Julian, her voice soft but firm. "Money buys new walls, sir, not new roots." Julian laughed, a loud, booming sound that made a few heads turn. It was the kind of laugh people make when they've never truly been told no, when they're used to their will being absolute. He thought it was hilarious, a quaint, naive sentiment from a sentimental fool. He left her $100 tip, a king's ransom in her world, a mere pittance in his, and walked out, certain he'd just encountered an amusing if slightly deluded character. Yet the sentence followed him like a shadow, clinging to him despite his best efforts to shake it off. Money buys new walls, not new roots. He told himself it was corny, saccharine, utterly meaningless, but he repeated it under his breath over and over, all the way back to the glittering tower where helicopters waited to ferry him to his next champagne-fueled conquest. It was an unwelcome earworm, a tiny seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of his ambition. That night, Julian sat in a glass conference room suspended high above the city, a modern-day fortress of finance. On the 80-foot screen, glowing with an almost celestial intensity, were the profit projections for Sterling Sky. The numbers were staggering: $1.2 billion in projected sales, a mind-boggling 400% return on investment. There was, of course, zero mention of Mama Rosie's diner, zero acknowledgement of the napkin swans, zero data point for human connection. It was pure, unadulterated capitalism, distilled to its most potent form. His CFO, a man whose entire existence seemed to revolve around quarterly reports and market fluctuations, clicked to the final slide. Ready for signature. Julian reached for his Mont Blanc pen, a sleek instrument of power, but it felt suddenly heavy in his hand. Not just heavy, but weighted, as if by every porch swing, he planned to bulldoze every shared garden hose, he planned to sever every childhood memory he was about to obliterate. He remembered Lila's cracked sneakers, the honest wear and tear of a life lived in service. He remembered the quiet dignity with which she had called a stranger sir, even as she gently but firmly refused to entertain his premise. For the first time in years, Julian Sterling hesitated. A deep, unfamiliar tremor ran through him. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their expensive chairs, their faces a mixture of confusion and mild alarm. Hesitation was not in the company handbook. Indecision was a foreign concept in Julian's world. He barked, "We vote next week," his voice sharper than intended, and strode out of the room before anyone could see the slight tremor in his hand, the sudden dampness in his eyes. He needed air. He needed answers. He needed something beyond these sterile numbers. Downstairs, retreating to the relative anonymity of his private office, he did something he hadn't done in years. For personal reasons, he Googled Mama Rosie's diner. What he found surprised him. Page after page of 5-star reviews, not just for the food, but for the atmosphere, for the feeling. They read like love letters to a beloved institution, testaments to a place that nourished more than just stomachs. One line in particular snagged him, pulling him up short. "Lila makes you feel like you matter, even when your wallet's empty." He hadn't felt that kind of unconditional acceptance, that sense of truly mattering, since before he could even spell the word merger. It was a feeling he'd long since forgotten, replaced by the hollow victory of financial conquest. The next morning he was back in the same worn hoodie, telling himself he was merely gathering more data, conducting further market research. A ridiculous excuse even to himself. Lila spotted him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, and raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Without a word, She slid a mug across the counter, the steam curling invitingly. "Decaf today," she teased, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "You look like you fought a ghost last night." He almost admitted the ghost had won, that it had haunted his every waking thought and disrupted his carefully ordered world. Instead, he forced a casual tone, leaning forward slightly. Hypothetically, he began, if this place disappeared overnight, where would Mr. Alvarez eat his oatmeal? Lila's smile faltered, her playful demeanor replaced by a quiet sorrow. She didn't need to think about it. She simply pointed to the wall behind the counter, a vibrant mosaic of faded Polaroids. Birthday parties, graduations, first dates, anniversaries. A lifetime of ordinary, extraordinary moments captured in yellowing squares. Each one a testament to a life lived, a memory made, a connection forged within these very walls. Hypothetically, she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Where would those memories live if the wall's gone? Where do you store a lifetime of laughter, of comfort, of belonging? Julian felt something crack inside his chest, like ice under a cautious foot, a deep fissure forming in the hardened shell he'd spent decades building around his heart. He wanted to argue economics, to cite statistics about property values and urban renewal, but the words tangled on his tongue, caught in the sudden overwhelming weight of her grief. Her eyes were watering, not with tears that fell, but with the unshed pain of imagining such a loss. And suddenly, profit charts felt flimsy, insignificant, almost obscene against the raw human weight of her sorrow. She walked away to refill ketchup bottles. Her shoulders slumped, and he noticed her hands were shaking. Not from fear, he realized, but from the sheer exhausting effort of being brave, of holding on to something precious against an invisible, powerful threat. He realized with a jolt that he was that threat. Julian returned a third day, the hoodie swapped for a plain tee, his usual practiced grin replaced by a desperate, almost pleading expression. He arrived at closing when the diner was empty except for Lila, who was wiping down tables, humming slightly off-key to herself. Her exhaustion was palpable, etched in the lines around her eyes, in the slight slump of her shoulders. He approached her, his voice low, earnest. "I need you to explain something," he said, the words tumbling out. "Why stay somewhere the world calls worthless? Why fight so hard for something so old?" Lila turned, rag still in hand, and for the first time, Julian saw her truly tired. Tired enough to collapse right there on the checkered floor. Her usual gentle resilience seemed to waver just for a moment. Softly, her voice imbued with a weariness that spoke of battles fought and sacrifices made, she replied, "Because the world measures price, we measure belonging." Then she added 8 words that slipped past his ironclad ambition, his carefully constructed defenses like water through a crack in a dam. 8 words that weren't a challenge but a quiet, irrefutable truth. You can't bury a lullaby under concrete. The sentence hung between them, small, almost whispered, yet it detonated in Julian's memory with the force of 1,000 wrecking balls. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was a key unlocking a forgotten chamber of his past. It unearthed the lullaby his mother used to hum off-key, just like Lila before her overtime shifts at the factory swallowed her alive before money became his only language, his only measure of worth. He stood very still, listening to Lila's faint off-key hum, feeling the impossible crushing weight of every future lullaby he was about to silence, every memory he was about to pave over. Lila reached out her fingers, gently touching his sleeve. Not pity, he realized, just simple, profound human connection. "Sir?" she said, her voice softer. "Still, go home." He walked out into the night, the cool air a stark contrast to the tears that burned hot against the cold, unyielding mask of power he had worn for so long. The mask was cracking. The boardroom, same glass walls, same intimidating silence 1 week later. The contract, thick with legalese and dotted with figures, glowed on the 80-foot screen, awaiting the final decisive flourish of Julian Sterling's signature. The air was thick with anticipation, the board members expectant, eager for their next colossal win. Julian stood remote in hand, and instead of the expected profit slide, he clicked to a grainy, slightly out-of-focus photo he'd snapped on his phone, the vibrant, chaotic mosaic of the diner's Polaroid wall. The faces, the moments, the sheer, unadulterated humanity. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, surprisingly calm amidst the palpable tension. "We're not building towers here. We're building graves for lullabies." Silence expanded, thick and heavy-laden with disbelief, confusion, and a hint of outright annoyance. The CFO, a man whose face rarely betrayed emotion, coughed nervously. "Sentiment doesn't cash checks, Mr. Sterling." He managed his voice carefully neutral. Julian smiled, a soft, sure smile that reached his eyes, a smile they hadn't seen in years. Sometimes he countered his gaze, sweeping across their incredulous faces. "You cash a future you can't hold in your hand." With a deliberate, almost ceremonial gesture, he ripped the contract in half, the crisp, tearing sound echoing loudly in the stunned silence. He watched the pieces drift slowly to the polished mahogany table like defective snow, like discarded dreams. Gasps circled the table, murmurs of outrage began to build. But something inside him, maybe the ghost of a humming mother, maybe the quiet strength of a tired waitress, maybe the resurfaced memory of childhood joy, felt freer, lighter, more profoundly alive than any quarterly gain had ever made him feel. He turned and walked out, leaving behind the shouts of clauses and penalties, the threats of lawsuits and financial ruin. The 8 words echoed louder than their outrage, a triumphant anthem in his newly awakened soul. "You can't bury a lullaby under concrete." He was, for the first time in a very long time, truly free. Word spread faster than any eviction notice could have. Sterling's sky was dead. The demolition was off. Julian braced himself for hatred, for suspicion, for the backlash of a community that had every reason to distrust a man like him. But the neighborhood responded with a cautious curiosity, a tentative hope that slowly blossomed into something more. He showed up in Maplewood not in a suit, but in a hard hat. Not to demolish, but to ask simply, genuinely, "What do you need?" Residents blinked, unused to such a question from someone with his power. Then, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, they began to speak. A new roof for Mrs. Kim, whose old one leaked every time it rained. A wheelchair ramp for Mr. Dawson, who had been confined to his porch for years. A small library corner for the kids who'd never seen new books, whose imaginations were starved for stories. Julian didn't just listen, he acted. He hired local crews, putting money directly back into the community he had almost destroyed. He paid fair wages, ensuring that the work benefited the people who lived there. He learned the profound difference between investing in property, which was about profit and square footage, and investing in people, which was about dignity, community, and the priceless fabric of shared lives. He became a regular at Mama Rosie's, a familiar, if still somewhat enigmatic figure. Lila still called him Sir, a habit she couldn't quite break. But now she added a knowing wink, a shared understanding of the quiet revolution that had taken place. His generous tips, once a dismissive gesture, now turned into college funds for Mateo and other kids in the neighborhood. Day-old pie, once a symbol of Lila's struggle, transformed into community feasts, bringing neighbors together. The diner, once just a place to eat, became the vibrant headquarters for Maplewood's renewal, a hub of activity and hope. The first-grade spelling tests on the wall were soon joined by blueprints for a coop garden where vibrant tomatoes grew beside colorful tulips, a testament to growth and life. Months later, Maplewood held a block party, a joyous explosion of color and sound. Streamers fluttered gaily between newly restored porches. Music spilled from open windows, a symphony of diverse cultures. Children chased dogs through the cool spray of sprinklers, their laughter echoing down the street. Julian, to everyone's amusement and his own genuine surprise, manned the grill flipping burgers with a surprisingly clumsy enthusiasm, while Mr. Alvarez, ever the good-natured tease, offered unsolicited advice on his technique. "You gotta listen to the sizzle, son," he'd chuckle. Lila approached 2 plastic cups of lemonade, sweating in her hands, the ice clinking softly. She offered him one, their fingers brushing, and clinked her cup against his. "Still think cracks are flaws, Julian?" she asked, a playful challenge in her eyes. He surveyed the street, a panorama of vibrant life. Chalk drawings sprawled across the pavement like temporary masterpieces. Neighbors shared folding chairs, stories, and laughter. He caught his own reflection in a puddle, and for the first time he saw a man who looked lighter, more genuine, more at peace than any private jet or penthouse could ever make him feel. "Cracks," he said, his voice thoughtful. A profound realization dawning on him, are where the songs get out. She laughed, the sound bright and clear as pennies dropping into a fountain. Someone started playing a lullaby on a weather-beaten guitar, a melody familiar and comforting. Julian, without a moment's hesitation, joined the hum off-key, but utterly unashamed. Profit margins and quarterly gains once ruled his nights, dictated his every move. Now he measured his true wealth in waves from friendly porches and shared songs, in the simple, trusting act of a neighbor borrowing his ladder without even needing to ask. He was no longer the man who could buy sunsets. He was the man who could appreciate them shared with friends from a porch that wasn't his, but felt like home. So after hearing this story, we have to ask you, what would you say if you had just 8 words to stop a billionaire from breaking hearts, from erasing a community, from paving over precious memories? What 8 words would be your miracle? Drop your 8-word wisdom in the comments below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. If this story made you believe that money isn't the only currency that truly matters, hit that like button, share it with someone who might need a reminder, and subscribe for more uplifting stories that prove kindness, integrity, and a little bit of unexpected wisdom can truly flip the richest script.